Welcome back to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for keeping it here. I am back with Nevada Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar talking about changes to our election system and the other work happening at the state level. Thank you again for coming back on the show.
Thank you. It's always great to be here.
All right. Well, speaking of being here, you, sir, are up for re-election next year. Are you running?
I am.
You are?
I
Okay.
am.
Same position. You're not switching it up on us.
No. Being Secretary of State I'm a project guy. And I feel like the Secretary of State's office is really a technology company. And we're as good as the technology we have. The fact that we're doing 2 massive system implementation, the voter registration election management system, and the replacement of Silver Flume with Project Orion, those are the things I get really excited about. And seeing the success of both of those systems is a good thing, and I want to make sure I finish what I started.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, a couple things that you were trying to get through in the last legislative session did happen. One bill that passed, AB 73, required the use of AI in campaign materials be disclosed. So am I reading this right by saying, like, if a candidate releases an ad that's a deep fake video of their opponent, that there'd have to be something on the ad that tells voters this is AI?
That is correct. What we want, elected officials, candidates can use AI to produce their content. All we want them to do is to tell the voter that this content was created by AI. So the voter can then make the decision how they receive that information. Again, it goes back to the transparency piece of our office, is making sure that we are educating the voter about what they're receiving and how they're receiving it.
Good timing for that legislation. We're already seeing AI videos becoming more mainstream in politics now. We didn't see it in the last election, if I recall.
You didn't. There was a couple instances of deep fakes, but what was really concerning from the AI perspective in the 24 election was mostly about the information that voters were receiving from the chatbots.
The chatbots?
Yes, because they go out and scrub all the information that's out in the universe. And I went to a program in New York City with one of the premier organizations that was studying AI in elections, and we tested all the different models and we asked Nevada specific questions. And they were producing false information. The one that bothered me the most was about, when do I need to register to vote to participate in the 24 election? And Nevada has same-day voter registration. And what they were telling people was that you needed to register to vote 30 days before the election. Imagine a young person who just turned 18 says, I want to register to vote. They're within that 30-day period, and they receive this information from the chatbot. We just disenfranchised a young person from the ballot box.
Gosh.
And so that was the concern in the 24 election. It's still the concern in the 26, but more, it's now the content that's going to be given to voters.
It's like whack-a-mole. It's impossible to stay up on top of all the different sources of bad information online. I mean, gosh, it's just exhausting. Okay, so in terms of disclosing that information, being AI, is it going to be pretty obvious and big? Is there parameters for how obvious it has to be, or it just has to be somewhere on the screen?
It just has to be somewhere on the ad. And this was a very big collaboration project. We worked with the Nevada Broadcasters Association. We worked with the Motion Pictures Association of America, because local broadcasters, TV stations like here, receive the ads from the candidate.
And we don't have a choice.
Right.
We
and
have
you're not
to air
the police.
Yeah.
And so it was figuring out, how do we build in what we need to do to protect voters, but yet still protect First Amendment rights, and also to not put the burden on those that have to accept it.
Yeah. Well, no, I appreciate that. This is a common misconception. People get very upset at us for the political ads. We don't have a choice. We have to air it. We can fact check it in our newscasts, but we can't not air it, which is occasionally problematic.
And you don't want to be in that position of deciding what to air and not air.
No, of course not. It just gets tricky when you have people yelling at you.
Yes, understood.
From both sides all the time. Okay, so ballot question last year, question 7, got thrown on last second. We're talking voter ID. It passed by a pretty large margin, but didn't get a ton of attention ahead of time because it was such a short notice thing. It's going to be back on the ballot this next time around. What's your position on voter ID? Do you think it would make Nevada's elections safer?
Well, first of all, voter ID exists in the voter registration process. So the verification of the voter does exist. And the safeguards of making sure that the person who is voting is who they say they are. However, there was a clear mandate in the 24 election from Nevada voters of 73% that said they want this in the process. We heard them and we understand, and I think the legislature tried to address this during its session with the bill that was introduced late in the session. And there was conversations between the legislature and the governor, and obviously it didn't work. But understanding that information and understanding that it's probably going to pass in the 26 election, I think early polling shows that the favorability is even higher than the 73%. And I think as elected leaders, we have to start to figure out how we're going to implement this process, because 26 is coming fast and it's going to probably pass. But then the challenge is, after the 26 election, that has to go to the 27 legislature. The legislature is then going to determine how they're going to take the language from the ballot initiative and then set the parameters for implementation, and it's going to be handed off to the Secretary of State's office. That probably handoff will happen in July of 27. The first election will be in February of 28, because we have early presidential primary elections. And so that'll give the Secretary of State's office about 6 months for implementation of a system that's gonna have to be done really well. It cannot be a reactive situation. It has to be a strategic implementation of just the systems, but also an education of the voter. And so looking at those timeline and those parameters, I've had some conversations with the governor to say, is there a way to implement this or begin the process so that we aren't catching voters off guard? And so those conversations are taking place now. Again, I'm trying to set up the Secretary of State's office for success, and which means success for the voters.
Okay. Well, we have very little time left, and I apologize because I do want to talk a little bit about what else your office does beside elections. With our final 3 minutes, you did pass a bill in this legislative session that has nothing to do with elections, has to do with helping fraud victims. Can you give me your quick elevator pitch about what this bill is?
We do securities fraud investigations. There's a whole team that does that. The challenge is victims of securities fraud don't come forward all the time, because they're embarrassed of making a bad decision. But these bad actors exist. And so we passed the Victims Restitution Fund that would help people who've lost everything that they've built into retirement. And if we have a little bit of something to help them get back on their feet, maybe they'll come forward with this information, and we can protect the market and we can protect others from being victims.
And so they can get up to $25,000 from the state while their case is going through.
That is correct. Once we find that they were a victim and that it was, a legitimate claim, we can help them out. And what that does is help every Nevadan to ensure that our investment market is strong, secure, and safe.
Okay. Well, we have just a minute and a half or so left. What did I miss? Is there anything else you really would like the public to know?
I always like to talk about Project Orion, which is our business filing. My goal is to make Nevada the #1 place for businesses to come to register and to incorporate. I am going after Delaware. I want to make sure that we are doing what we can to make Nevada the best place to do business, and you're starting to see that shift actually happen.
Delaware just got a shiver up its spine. I didn't know. Are they #1?
They are. They make about $2 billion off of business incorporations. We make about $250 million. Actually participated in a lawsuit against Delaware because they were trying to prevent a company from moving from Delaware to Nevada. And the Delaware Supreme Court agreed with us. And now you're starting to see some movement to Nevada.
Wow. Interesting stuff. All right. Well, Secretary, final message before we say goodbye.
Go Pack.
Register to vote, maybe.
Great.
Priorities. All right, that is it for this episode of Face the State. But for more information or to see past episodes, you can head to our website. It's 2news.com. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next week.